Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals, I'm your host Hannah, and this is Under the Scrubs. I want to say, what are we, episode 32? 33? I don't know, but what I do know is that today we are going to be talking about a few cases that revolve around bioethics. That's like the interdisciplinary study of the moral, social, and legal issues that arise from advances in life sciences, medicine, healthcare, and technology. So, like organ transplant is considered bioethics. Patient consent, using AI in healthcare, genetic engineering, like that kind of stuff. The first case that I've seen of this, that kind of I was aware of, was the HeLa cells, and that was with Henrietta Lacks. And that is actually one of the cases that we're going to discuss today. I had to read a book in community college, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and I personally think, now it's a great read. I was in one of those times in my life where maybe I didn't have an appreciation for reading or of the story itself, or, a whole lot of it. I think it was just like, it's a college class. What do I care about this, right? My frontal lobe was not developed, and all I was focused on was checking Yik Yak for mentions of, I don't know, someone falling in love with me while I walked the hallways, texting my friends for college parties, coming up on the weekend, and just being dumb. So if anybody remembers Yik Yak, that was a wild time. Loved checking it, seeing if, I don't know, anybody was talking about me. Sometimes I would post about other people. But look at me now. I've matured, and that's saying a lot. We are currently packing everything up right now in our current apartment. We're just trying to get ready for our move into our house. Your girl's gone a little crazy. I made an Excel spreadsheet about projects that I want to start, little honey-do list, house maintenance for monthly and weekly stuff. I'm just down deep in this bee. I am doing back-to-back recordings today, so that way my editor can jump in on this and get it edited. We can get the episode set up to post and then pack this computer up. This computer, I'm not gonna lie to you, pulls a stupid amount of power. Like, it actually trips the breaker in the bedroom that we record in. I don't know why it pulls so much power, because honestly, I just use it to play some games, right, and record my podcasts, and then my husband does some nerd shit on it. But this thing pulls power like a small little space station, and sometimes it kind of sounds like it, and it's got all weird lights and shit. I don't know. My husband does all the tech stuff. I don't do any of this. So my small little timeout for the week. I think this is kind of buck wild, and it's something that was like a very big shock to me. I think it's crazy that we don't get paid holidays, right? Why is that? And I know, like, no nursing job that I've ever worked has given me a paid holiday. Or, I mean, like, you get holiday pay if you work on it, but I think it's crazy that okay, hear me out. I understand it's a 24-hour job. I get that. No days off, 24, 365, whatever. Okay. But it's bullshit to be working in a clinic or working in an OR where you have to take that holiday off. You were forced to, and you don't get paid for it, right? And you have to use your own PTO. Or if you do work on a day where, like, everybody else is closed, right? Like Juneteenth or Indigenous Peoples Day or Martin Luther King Day, right? Like, the bank gets it off. My husband gets it off. Come on now, the government's taking it off, but you're going to make me come in and do shit and work. And you're not even going to give me holiday pay for that. I think that's a wild concept, that you don't want to pay us like real people either, but, that's just me. And quite literally every other nurse I know. Small rant over. References for today's episode is Britannica, Biography, PBS News, Medical News Today, CDC, National Archives, and the History Channel. So in 1920, Henrietta Lacks was born on August 1st in Roanoke, Virginia. Originally, she was named Loretta Pleasant, but later on in her life, she had changed her name. Her mom died in 1924, and so Henrietta was sent to live with her grandpa on like an old slave quarters of like their white ancestors' plantation. And she had shared a room with her first cousin, David Day Lacks. And this is important because in 1935, Day and Henrietta had a baby. And yes, they are first cousins. Henrietta at the time was only 14. 4 years later, she had another child, a daughter, and then she got married to David Day Lacks in 1941. I guess that saves you from a name change. That's a lot of paperwork. They had moved out to Maryland, and they actually had 3 more kids. They actually had one daughter that they had placed into a hospital for the insane because of developmental delays, which is not great. Before she was pregnant with her 5th child, though, she kind of felt this like knot inside of her. She had a lot of bleeding, and then she actually had a lump on her cervix. So several months postpartum, she was finally able to go in, and she was referred to go see a provider. In February of that 1951, Henrietta went to Johns Hopkins Hospital after just like that abdominal pain, the bleeding, this knot. And Dr. Howard Jones there actually diagnosed her with cervical cancer. So they were doing radiation treatment, and 2 doctors had taken cervical samples, like tissue, without her consent or her knowledge, right? So she pursued this radiation treatment. August 8th, though, she went back into the hospital. She's still having severe abdominal pain, and she actually remained there until she died weeks later. Weeks later, actually being October 4th in 1951, she died at the Johns Hopkins Hospital at age 31. They did do a partial autopsy and revealed that cancer had metastasized to the body. She was buried in an unmarked grave in Clover, Virginia, which was the site of her childhood home. So these samples that were taken from her, they had made their way to a research lab, Dr. George Otto Gay, and he had noticed that these cells were very unusual, that a lot of cells really kind of died off after a few days, but these ones were like incredibly durable. And Gay was actually on a mission to find, like, quote unquote, an immortal cell line to use in cancer research. So these cells were isolated and then multiplied, and so the specific cell that's multiplied and isolated, it creates the cell line. Thus, the HeLa cells were born. So they used the first 2 of her first name and the first 2 of her last name. Now, these cells revolutionized the medical research community. Ever heard of polio? You ever seen it? You can thank the HeLa cells to that. Jonas Salk began researching polio in 1947, and by 1951, he had determined that there were actually 3 distinct types of polio and developed the, quote, killed virus vaccine. So the HeLa cells were also used in studying Parkinson's and leukemia and just honestly, just a shit ton of things, right? But it wasn't until the 1970s that the family was even made aware that cells had been taken without consent. In 1973, scientists had contacted the family because they were looking for blood samples and other genetic material. But when the family had asked how the cells were being used and publications that included like their own genetic information, they pretty much got ghosted. All inquiries went ignored. The family had no idea that the cells were taken. Henrietta didn't know that the cells were taken and that they were being used to advance medical research. And honestly, they were like, well, we've also never been compensated for the use of genetic material. It wasn't even until 2010 that Johns Hopkins had released a statement, and they said that they had sincerely acknowledged the contribution to advances in biomedical research made possible by Henrietta Lacks and the HeLa cells. It's important to note that at the time the cells were taken from Mrs. Lacks's tissue, the practice of obtaining informed consent from cell or tissue donors was essentially unknown among academic medical centers. 60 years ago, there was no established practice of seeking permission to take tissue for scientific research purposes. The laboratory that received Mrs. Lacks's cells had arranged many years earlier to obtain such cells from any patient diagnosed with cervical cancer as a way to learn more about a serious disease that took the lives of so many. Johns Hopkins never patented the HeLa cells, nor did it sell them commercially or benefit in a direct financial way. Today, Johns Hopkins and other research-based medical centers consistently obtain consent from those asked to donate tissue or cells for scientific research. In 2013, the National Institutes of Health had actually granted the Lacks family control over how data on the HeLa cell genome would be used. 2 members of the Lacks' family actually formed part of the NIH HeLa Genome Data Access Working Group, which reviewed researchers' applications for access to the HeLa sequence information. In 2021, there was a lawsuit that was brought forward to Thermo Fisher Scientific from the Lacks' family estate. Thermo Fisher Scientific, they are a science and technology firm, and they actually ended up asking the judge, the firm did, if they can dismiss the case, and said that the claims were too old. The Lacks' family lawyer actually argued that that shouldn't apply to this case, and because, the company has continued to benefit financially from the use of the HeLa cells. August 1st, 2023 would have I mean, that would have been actually Henrietta's 103rd birthday, the lawyer for the Lax's estate said that they had reached a confidential settlement after a full day of closed-door negotiations inside a federal courthouse. And I mean, so it's not just like polio and leukemia and all that, right? That she's contributed to these HeLa cells. I mean, they even contributed to COVID-19 vaccine research, cancer research, and sequencing the human genome. In the late 1950s, researchers used the cells to investigate effects of X-rays and to develop the method that's still used to this day of testing whether cells are cancerous or not. The HeLa cells have been sent into space. They were used to investigate effects of space travel and radiation on human cells. They've been used to determine how salmonella causes infections, investigate blood disorders, advance understanding of HIV. So the biggest case that these cells really contributed to as well was the cause of Henrietta Lacks's cancer was the human papillomavirus, or HPV. There's more than 150 types out there, but there's only a very small group that can cause cervical cancer. Actually, 99.7% of cervical cancers are HPV positive. The HPV vaccine can prevent over 90% of HPV-related cervical cancers, but 10% of people with HPV infections on the cervix develop cancer. There was actually a Nobel Prize that was won in 1976, and it was the discovery of HPV's essential role in cervical cancer, and many scientists have been investigating how HPV causes cancer. And the HeLa cells are the foundation to all of this. And so what really makes these cells so special? Well, the HeLa cells have 76 to 80 chromosomes, where normal ones only have about 46, right? This is a result from the infection with HPV, which causes errors in the genome to accumulate as uncontrolled division occurs. HeLa cells grow faster than most cancer cells, so if they contaminate other cell cultures, they really overtake them. Researchers attribute this to the fact that Henrietta Lacks also had syphilis, which weakens the immune system and allows cancers to grow really aggressively. HeLa cells can divide an infinite number of times as their telomeres regrow after each division. In normal cells, telomeres decrease at each division, leading to cells aging and dying. In total, HeLa cells have played the absolute main lead in the work that has led to 3 different Nobel Prizes and so many other scientific discoveries, but yet her name is not known. So when all of this is starting to kind of come to light in the 1970s, just taking patient tissue without consent, but definitely like with Henrietta Lacks, the family is like, wait, what do you mean? You took this tissue and now you want some like our DNA, our blood, or whatever. And like you guys have been making medical advancements, which is great, but also like there's other people that are profiting just a shit ton of money, and yet we haven't seen any of that, and you took this without our consent, right? Now, on the other side of this, we are starting to see the Tuskegee Syphilis study kind of come out to public as well. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service had been working with Tuskegee Institute, and they actually began to record the natural history of syphilis in men. And it's now referred to as the USPH Untreated Syphilis Study at Tuskegee. Initially, the study was about black men. It was roughly 600 of them. 399 of them had syphilis, and 201 of them did not. Informed consent was not a thing back then, so it was not collected, and researchers told participants that they were being researched because they had bad blood. So bad blood was kind of an umbrella term that collected just like a shit ton of ailments, right? Like anemia, fatigue, and syphilis. But they told the people who are, participated that they were going to get free medical exams, free meals, and burial insurance, which, I mean, even now to this day, I think anybody that's like, oh, free medical exams, free meals, like, sign me up. I don't care about the burial insurance. I don't know what's going to happen, but all I know is free medical exams and free meals. Sign me up. So in the 1972, Associated Press had published a story. The Assistant Secretary for Health and Scientific Affairs had appointed an advisory panel to review this study that had been published, right? They came back and they said, yo, this study is whack as hell. Results were disproportionately meager compared with known risks to the human subjects involved. In October 1972, the panel advised that, yo, you got to stop this study. A month later, the Assistant Secretary for Health and Scientific Affairs had announced that, yes, actually, we are done. We're good, right? March 1973, the panel had advised the Secretary of Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, or now known as the Department of Health and Human Services. They instructed them that the USPHS needs to provide all necessary medical care for the survivors of the study. And that's what you want to be called, right? As a survivor of a study. Tuskegee Health Benefit Program was established to provide these services. So in 1975, a couple years after that, they had decided that participants, their wives, widows, and the children were added to the program. In 1995, the program was expanded to include health as well as medical benefits. The last participant in the study died in January 2004. The last widow that was receiving care benefits, that they died in January 2009. The remaining children continued to receive medical and health benefits, and there's actually 10 left. In 1973, there was a class action lawsuit that was filed on behalf of the study participants and the families, resulting in a $10 million out-of-court settlement. And so, what was bad about this, right? What was bad about this study? The study had followed men who had syphilis, and they left them untreated to basically just watch what happened if you didn't treat it, right? At the beginning of this study, penicillin wasn't around, which is a cure for syphilis, but by 1947, it was a recommended treatment for it. They never administered it, though, to these victims. Men died, went insane, they went blind, or they had experienced other, severe health problems. By the time that the study came to light, 28 participants, and I use that word lightly, had perished, and more than 100 had passed from complications. 40 spouses had been diagnosed with it and passed it on to 19 children at birth. In 1997, Bill Clinton issued an apology, but we, as a society, did not learn, apparently, right? In 2010, Obama and other federal officials apologized for another experiment that was done in Guatemala. 1946 to 1948, nearly 700 men and women, and it is prisoners, soldiers, mental patients, they were, I hate this, intentionally infected with syphilis. There was hundreds more that were exposed to other sexually transmitted diseases as part of the study as well, and they were intentionally infected without their knowledge or consent. The purpose of this was to determine whether penicillin could prevent, not just cure, syphilis. Results of the study, which took place with the cooperation of the Guatemalan government officials, were never published. The American public health researcher in charge of the project, Dr. John Cutler, actually went on to become a lead researcher in the Tuskegee experiments. Following Cutler's death in 2003, a historian, Susan Reverby, uncovered records of the Guatemalan experiments while looking into the Tuskegee study, and so she had shared her findings with the U.S. government officials in 2010, leading to this official apology. Really what this is, we just didn't get consent, right? I don't know how anyone really trusted medical providers back then, and how, I guess, hasn't really affected trust nowadays. Our trust nowadays is mainly off of misinformation and just a bunch of crazy shit, right? I think it's incredibly fucked to be intentionally infecting people with diseases without their knowledge just to see what happens, right? I've seen neurosyphilis once in my career, and it was insane to kind of see the progression and us trying to rule out all this other stuff. And then it was oh shit, it's syphilis that's now gone up to your brain. I couldn't imagine having to watch people get sick like that and know that I inflicted that on someone. As for Henrietta Lacks, if I was family, I would be wanting that bag too, okay? On top of knowing where my mom or grandma or whoever she was to you, knowing that her genome is being used. Because your family name is tied to it, right? I would want to make sure that's being used appropriately and respectfully. The family initially was hesitant to speak to the author of the book. She's an investigative journalist, but the book, again, is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and I don't blame them. Nowadays, you can just get on TikTok and go viral, but, what were your choices back then? People of color still weren't being seen as real people. They were treated poorly. You just can't change generational hate in a few weeks. So my heart breaks for the family. I highly recommend reading Henrietta Lacks' story because, she is an invisible backbone to scientific advancements and research and disease and testing and vaccines and all sorts of shit. And she gets no credit. The father of gynecology that we had talked about, John Marion Sims, is he the father of gynecology when really the enslaved black women that he experimented on with zero sedation, they're the backbone of his research. They deserve to have their name spoken and remembered. And it's not a matter of melanin in your skin. It's a matter of giving credit where credit is due. Okay. You don't give credit to the father for bringing a baby into this world. You give credit to the mother who ruined her body and her hormones and carried the parasite for 9 months and popped it out. Maybe shit herself. Maybe she didn't. I don't know. And all the lifelong issues you're going to have after that, right? And then you have to deal with the difficult world of postpartum. And then you've got the stigmas of all the, you're a bad mom because of this. And no, you are because of this. Like, bitches, please. We're all just trying our best, okay? Just support each other like your shitty Victoria's Secret bra supported your little A cups while you were in college. Now, trad wives, get out of my face, though. Can't argue with a bitch that doesn't have a Roth IRA. Okay, so I got a little off topic there for a second. I need to get back to packing, so I will encourage you to check out the HeLa cells, their story, Henrietta's story, support each other, try showing someone kindness and grace this week. And consent is always important, whether it's in life or in science. So I will see you guys next Tuesday in Science We Trust. Okay, love you, bye.